introduce myself real quick, and then we've got a couple announcements. So I already did I introduce myself? My name is Sophia Prater. I am the Chief Evangelist for Object-Oriented UX and the organizer of OOUX Happy Hour. I have my two lovely co-organizers with me, and we are going to be talking to them deeply today. So I know that they already introduced themselves a little bit, but I'm going to give a little bit of my introduction of these two lovely ladies. So Imogen and Upma, I have known them since cohort 3. That was the end of 2000. Cohort 3 was we were just still getting all this stuff up and running. So they are, and both of them have been practicing object-oriented UX before joining the cohort. So I would call them early adopters of object-oriented UX. They saw the value early. And have been using it in their work. Upma is at as an EPAM, which is like a big consultancy. Upma, you've said that it's way bigger in Europe than it is here. Have you said that?
I don't know numbers wise, but it feels bigger, and people know about it more in Europe. If you talk about EPAM in Eastern Europe, they think the same way we think about Google is how they think about EPAM.
Okay. And some of the bigger consultancies, right? Like Accenture or something like that.
Yeah. It's at that level. It feels, I've never been over there, so I don't know. But from what my understanding is, it feels like that over there. Yeah.
So EPAM is huge, big enterprise level clients. Upma works on a lot of really complicated stuff and and I'm just forever thankful and indebted to her for the evangelism that she's done with object-oriented UX. I think you've brought 4 other EPAMers into the course, into certification, at least 4, maybe 5. So I'm just forever thankful for that. And just always have had such an amazing vibe with Upma. So I'm really excited to get to know her even more today. Even though we've known each other for years, we're just really going to get into it. And Imogen, also from cohort 3. We've got a lot of cohort 3 folks here today, which is awesome. So Imogen, I've gotten to see her career just keep getting bigger and more exciting. So she was at Moorfields Eye Hospital when I first met Imogen. And I think you got a big promotion at the eye hospital while we were, I don't know, like 2021 or something. And then you've moved from Moorfields, which is part of the NHS, to head of product at the NHS. So that's the National Health Service over in the UK. And I remember having conversations early on about digital transformation and how you were using OOUX. And that was a lot of moving things from PDFs, like a lot of information, rich content locked up in PDFs and moving those into a digital format for accessibility purposes, and also connecting the content a lot better. So lots of amazing OOUX work happening over at the NHS, and I'm really excited to get into. So that is my intro. We're going to go into basically before, during, and after with OOUX. It's kind of like beginning or kind of prehistory, beginning, middle, and future. Okay. So let's go ahead. We're going to do something really cheesy real quick and just go into, let's change our backgrounds real quick, change our video filters. And because we're going to talk about the before times right now. So we're going to be infomercial here. So let's actually start with you, Upma, because you just dropped a bomb on us while everybody else was in the breakout room. I didn't really know that. So you said that you did a big career pivot. And I know this was kind of in the confidence of a smaller group, but I'm just going to go ahead and throw the number out at 40. So we had Valentina come in, and she's talking about she's working on a midlife career pivot, and you also had one. Can you talk a little bit about let's talk about before you even got into UX? You said you were pivoting from a totally different career at the age of 40, and you actually were unemployed for 2 years. Let's tell us more about that. What was going on?
So to be fair, I was 36 when I lost the job. and I was 40 when I finally got my UX job. So it took a really, really long time. And so my previous life, I have a Master of Fine Arts degree in film and video production. I had dreams of being some kind of filmmaker, but between self-sabotage and everyone else sabotaging, that just didn't happen. I did end up working in corporate video, and I worked at a place for almost a decade. And at the end of the Great Recession, that company was just kind of spiraling out of control, and I lost that job. And I'm in Philadelphia, not a big, like, actually I moved to Philadelphia because it had an emerging film scene, but by the time this happened, I don't know where that scene kind of went. And also the corporate kind of jobs were just never really here. So I had just bought a house, and I was like, well, if we're going to stay in Philadelphia, I probably need to figure out something else to do. And if we don't stay in Philadelphia, I have no idea what we would do. So I just decided, like, I like Philadelphia. I love Philadelphia. I like my house. Let's just like figure it out. And my husband was awesome and like supported me through all of it. And so I early on, I did realize that like shifting to something in the tech scene would be a smart thing to do. I started to teach myself HTML and CSS, and I was like, yeah, okay, I think this seems fine. I could totally do this. But I actually didn't get very far. I kept running into this word user experience over and over and over. And I'm like, what is this? And so I just kind of dug in a little bit. And being in Philadelphia is totally a privilege and a pleasure. But at that time, it was really cool because there were a lot of who I feel like are really bigwig UXers. Like she's not here anymore, but we had Jess Ivins, who went on to work at Center with Jared Spool. We used to have Angela Coulter, who went on to 18F, and Kevin Hoffman, her husband. They're not in Philadelphia anymore. We have Sarah Wachter-Betcher. She's still here. So like we just had like all these really big people that I had access to and could get guidance from. And so it was really cool. And they were.
And did you reach out to those people and like?
Yeah. So through our local Philly Chi group, I met a lot of these people, and Jessica especially was very, I call her my first mentor, and she really kind of guided me. She kind of made me see how I could do my own. The boot camps weren't around yet, so like I had to be self-taught. She kind of guided me through that process, and like introduced me to a lot of people, and told me to join the board of Philly Chi, and I was like, but I'm not even a UXer yet. She's like, just do it. And that was great.
Oh, wow.
And that's kind of how I landed my first UX job, because someone else who was on the board was like, hey, we have an opening, come interview with us. And so 4 years after I lost my job, I got a job, my first UX job, with a really great team. And yeah, so that was that. And it took me, so that was, I got my first UX job. I don't remember the year. It was like 2015, 2016. Yeah, I forget what I was going to say, but it's been a little while.
I love that you like got on the board of Philly Chi before you even felt like ready at all for it. And I just think that's such a good nugget for everybody to bring away, that like you are just getting into UX, OUX. like doing the things that feel a little bit scary, like doing the things that like, I don't necessarily feel ready for this, but the opportunity has presented itself. Like for me, it was ladies at UX. Like I didn't feel ready. I was like, I didn't think about myself as an event organizer. And now I definitely do. And I learned so much from that and got so many connections. So whether it's going to the events, doing the thing that feels scary, applying, like I say all the time, applying to the conference talk before you have the slides, before you have it ready, like create the pitch before you actually create the content because you'll get the content ready. So so now let's just fast forward a little bit, Upma, and like think about, okay, so you're in UX, you're excited about it, you get your first job, you start like, what is that like? And what are some of the missing pieces? Like what's frustrating?
Yeah. So actually, I remember what I was going to say. What we were talking about when you all were in the breakout rooms. What was frustrating was actually I knew inherently that there was some skill transfer from a film and video world to a UX world. I just didn't know how to put it together. I didn't understand. Like I just couldn't figure it out. So like what? 8 years later, I'm like finally starting to figure it out. But what was really cool was the team that I joined was amazing. They were all like mid-level and high-level people, like director level and mid-level UXers, and they all were like, yes, let's take Uma under our wing and teach her everything. And it was so cool. And what was really funny, I guess, is as I'm doing my self-taught journey, I am totally like, this information architecture thing is so cool. Like, of course, you have to organize everything before you do anything. And so the first job I was at was Digitas Health, and at Digitas, a lot of the people there were sort of like-minded. That we do information architecture. Now, the sites we're building like pharmaceutical marketing sites, so they're not like these massive software programs. They're just like, often they're just 4-page websites. There was one that I worked on that was a massive website, and I had to, like, part of my job was to keep up with the sitemap, which was pages and pages and pages long. It was like ridiculous. But so the thinking about the structure of things while I was there was validating, because that's how I had been teaching myself. And then when I left there, I was there for maybe, I think, close to 2 years. And when I left there and I started doing consulting work, it was kind of like a really rude awakening surprise that nobody else seems to care about doing information architecture. And I really couldn't figure it out. And that's probably been the most frustrating thing for me, is like, why aren't people doing this? And why don't people understand that they need to do it? And why are they so sort of like confident about, like, we don't have to do this, that we're not doing it that way, we're doing it this way. And like, I think, well, I did a World IAA talk this past weekend in London, thanks to Rick. And something that I mentioned in that talk, and that I say a lot to small groups of people, is that I think that I have a theory, which is sort of like, as we've been working on products that are just more complicated and more complex, the AI of those products, the IA of those projects are also getting more complex and harder to do. And I think there's two possible theories that I have. One is that people don't know how to do it, and so they're just kind of like, well, we know how to do these other things, that'll just kind of take care of itself. And like, they just kind of brush it under the rug and like sort of like ignore it a little bit. And then the other thing is, I think maybe unintentionally people are skipping it because they're defining information architecture wrong. I don't think that, I think people are defining it as like, it's your site map or it's your navigation. And that's just like, that is not the whole of the definition, but that's what a lot of people are equating that. And so I think they think they're doing information architecture, but they're really not. And so yeah, so that's been like my main frustration over the last few years is like, we get like, how do I convince my teammates to do the work?
It's like if you're using, I mean, I honestly don't see, like if you're using more traditional information architecture tools to do this like enterprise level, super complicated information architecture work, it becomes untenable. Like it just like, it's those tools, like it's not the thinking and it's not the philosophy behind it is still, but like the tools, like literally the visualization, those traditional visualizations of information architecture do really start to break down. And I think that's where like OOUX starts to shine. It's this way that is scalable and can like help you do that kind of like really like you're designing systems of systems, not just like a system. You're designing like how these systems actually hook together. So yes, and I feel like a lot of the times information architecture really is just like the definition of the thing. Like it is that structuring piece. It's that third diamond in between that research and discovery diamond and the design diamond. You've got to structure the thing. And that, I mean, I had the same frustration in my career where it was just like, we don't have time for that. And that was like, I feel like I haven't been in that situation in a while, but I was just talking to a friend earlier this week, and she was complaining about how she was having to stand up for an entry-level designer who the product manager, like she was trying to design these screens. Again, this is in healthcare, again, complicated screens, and she was literally told this guy was saying out of his mouth, don't even worry about understanding it. We just need to add a little bit of UX. I think it's still happening. This happened last week. Like people, like, I don't know, raise your hand in the chat. Like, does this still happen to you? I'm legitimately curious where you are not given the space to understand the structure of the thing before you start designing, like thinking about Jesse James Garrett's 5 layers. Like you don't get to understand the structure before you design the surface. So I'm hearing like, yeah, okay, that's still happening. It's still happening. So fighting the good fight. So, okay, popping over to Imogen. Imogen, can you give us a little bit of like life before, let's actually, we don't need to back all the way up, but like life before OOUX, like before you'd even heard of it, like what were you doing? I think you were mainly in content strategy, right?
Oh, I've been all over the place. So I think, well, my career started similarly from a kind of art perspective. So I studied art, and then I got really interested in teaching myself how to code. I found that I came really naturally to programming. And so I did a master's degree in interactive design, but it was at art college, so it was so bloody pretentious. But I built an interactive installation using C++. So, I wasn't shying away from some hardcore programming at the time. This was pre-user experience, at least in the term, in the use of the words. So I studied interactive design, which is what it was all called then. And it was sort of at the birth of when organizations were really launching into sort of web design. Everything was kind of transitioning away from Flash. So that was kind of when I first started out. I'd like to think I look a lot younger than I actually am, but I was a pro in ActionScript and, RIP ActionScript. And then everything kind of moved away from Flash, and it was kind of the birth of HTML and kind of, that whole kind of journey. But it was sort of pre-user experience. It's certainly pre-service design. It's certainly pre a lot of the language that we use now. So that whole semantic shift I have kind of experienced in my career. But I started out doing kind of web design, although it was kind of new media. It was all new media, new media assistant. That was my very first job. but I've done pretty much every single job has been in the digital world somehow. But I started out as a kind of coder, programmer, designer, and then kind of led into, well, I did a bit of social media management and comms management, digital comms, all sorts of things. And then started to sort of progress up the ladder and away from kind of doing and more about kind of building digital teams, kind of leading kind of digital change in organizations. And I sort of worked across public sector, charity sector, and now the NHS. But I've kind of, each role has kind of been a role up the ladder in some way, either like in terms of scale, in terms of complexity, in terms of kind of, you know, I've had lots of different titles, from a new media assistant to a digital lead to a user experience lead. I'm now a head of product. What the hell does that mean? So I've kind of done a bit of everything. But I guess the thread that kind of underpins all of those different jobs is a real focus on designing experiences for people. That is essentially what I've done all the way from the beginning, even when I was doing, you know, conceptual art installations at art college, to now working in kind of healthy NHS space. It's all about the people, and it's all about what I'm trying to do for them and the problems I'm trying to solve for them. So that is what I've been always doing. I think coming into the sort of the color version of OOUX has been, for me, it really hones in on, you know, what's really nice with what Upma was saying is kind of leaning on sort of the OOUX process and the ORCA process around sort of finding that structure, or a way to create that structure, and sort of the tools and the methods to do that. Yes, I agree with that as well, but for me it's also about those experiences that we're building, that this is not just a tool for IA and creating structure. It's so much more than that. And actually the power of this is beyond the structure, in defining those experiences, and what we can really, you know, the power of this is so much more. And I think that's particularly pertinent in my role as a product person, because I'm thinking always about value and what we're doing, you know, for the people that we're designing the experiences for. And I really think this is a process that can help you define that and really gives you those tools and techniques to get into the nitty-gritty, the things that we tend to shy away from. And this is a way to embrace that. And it's been really helpful for me to kind of use this in order to get into some of those, you know, difficult conversations, but helpful.
Yes, those difficult conversations that if you don't have the tool for the difficult conversation, then you push it under the rug and you're like, it'll just work its way out, because you don't have the tool. So this is the tool to have those difficult conversations, talk about the nitty gritty, talk about before you even start designing screens, do we need some inheritance structure here? That kind of thing. That's just stuff that tends to make people's brain melt a little bit. But then at the end of the day, they're like, oh, that was good. That was good stuff. We got a lot done. I have such similar experience of going, and the way that I describe it is, I felt like for a really long time, literally the first 5 years of my career, I felt like I was designing in the dark. I felt like I had this shaky flashlight, and I'd get a lock on something that I knew, and then I'd go look somewhere else and kind of get a little view on this other piece of it. And then I look back and it had changed. It's scope changes and some new requirement comes on. So I actually, side note, I've got a new podcast episode coming out later on today, OOUX podcast, with a deep dive into this story of mine. So I'm not going to get into my story, but that is coming out. So watch out for that. Okay. Should we turn let's turn our color back on, because let's get into, y'all are fast. Woo. Okay. So you start getting into OOUX, and can you, I'll just keep the ball on Imogen right now. Can you, in your words, define, you kind of already did, but OOUX and ORCA, what is it? For those that are here that are what is this OOUX thing? How would you describe it to somebody, or how would you describe it maybe to even a new boss? that is coming in? Like, let's say you get like a new director or something like that you kind of have to like get them on board. What's the elevator pitch? How do you talk about it?
Yeah, it's a really good one, because I sort of feel like I'm going to use the context in which I work, because I think it's really important, and I'm like so like focused on the NHS. And when you work in the public sector in the UK, everyone talks about services or the language of services. I'm a head of product in a service world, so I have this kind of crisis of identity that like I feel like I'm a bit of a service designer trapped in a product body. Yes, we deal with products, but we also deal with services, and we've got this kind of clash of, I don't know, definition, that's this tension that exists in that world. But everyone is generally focused on service. Now, if you're working in the public sector and you're focused on services, everyone then usually focuses on verbs.
Mm.
And I'm not saying that is wrong at all. I think that's really, really important, because verbs are generally the things, the goals or the outcomes that we're trying to achieve, or the things that people are trying to achieve. You know, what are people trying to get to? What are people trying to do? That is really important, but it's not the only thing that we should be focused on. And I think that this is where this process really slots in, that like somebody says good services are verbs, and that's the kind of end of that sentence. Well, good services are verbs, but nouns, or the things, are how we make sense of them. And if we don't take the time to think about those things, how they relate, what they mean, how we define them, who needs to access them, why they need to access them, then we're missing all of that essence and all of that trick. And if we just focus on the kind of verbs, I think we're going to lose a lot of stuff. Basically, we're going to jump that cognitive leap between those diamonds, which I always felt I was kind of living in. Like, well, there's got to be something more than, you know, research jumping from, you know, definition of a problem to a wireframe. There's a cognitive leap between those two states, and I think there's a huge danger of just focusing on the verbs. So that's my kind of take on this, is that yes, good services are verbs, but nouns are how we make sense of them, and we need to start there and, you know, follow this process, see the power, basically.
Yes. And like, and I've been careful to like, I've, you know, said things like object first, and like, you know, I'm like object oriented UX. Like, it feels like I'm like really saying like, oh, that nouns are more important than verbs. And that's not it at all. It's almost nouns in service of the verbs. Exactly. Like, because verbs are so important, and because people at the end of the day want to just get stuff done. Like, you gotta create some sort of transformation for people, whether it's like being able to book their appointment and you know, get the surgery that they need, or like whatever that is. You need to define the nouns so that people can understand the verbs. And at the end of the day, like, a lot of the verbs are, you're doing something to something else. So starting with those nouns to figure out, okay. And often it goes like, it kind of jumps. It's like, we have these like macro outcomes, right? Samuel Hulick and I talk about it on the podcast in 2 episodes on these value paths. And he's like, yeah, you want to start with the macro outcomes. Like, how are we trying to help people? What is the problem we're trying to solve? Like, yes, of course we start there. Then we figure out what those nouns are in that problem domain. And then we can think about the more like task oriented stuff that's really just means to an end when it comes to like actually manipulating those objects. Those are means to an end for the outcome. Like, the outcome for NHS is to have a healthier population, I'm guessing, you know, preventative and other types of care so that your population is healthier. But then you have to do things like book the surgery, which is a means to an end, right? So anyway, yes, love that. The nouns and the verbs need to work together. And in general, our industry is very, very verb focused, without a piece of like, all of our process is all about the flows and the journeys and the verbs, which is all great. And you don't need to throw any of that out to do OOUX. OOUX just helps bolster that work and support that work. Upma, thoughts?
Yeah. So since I've gotten my certification, I guess it's been a couple of years. I've been working on like, how do I start a project, and how do I introduce people to this concept? Because this is what you get now. This is how I think, this is how I work, and I just don't know how to do it any other way. So this is what we're going to do. And so basically, like right at the start, I was kind of like, we're going to do OOUX. Oh my God, this is like the best thing ever. You're going to love this. And I've learned to like just chill and not do that, and kind of in a more subtle way. So usually what I do now is after I learn as much as I need to learn before I start talking, I say, okay, so essentially what we're doing here is we're designing a system for you. And then I open merriam-webster.com and I show them the definition of system. And I say, so a system is an interconnected group of items. And that's what we need to do. And so I say, the first thing we need to do to understand how your system is going to get structured is to understand what those items are. So what are the nouns? What are the things? Let's think about that first. And then once we understand what the things are in your system, we can interconnect them and we can think about the system more broadly. And that has been working. That has been working really well for me.
I'm looking it up right now. Is that really the definition of a system?
Yeah.
Yeah, a regularly interacting or independent group of items forming a unified whole.
Yeah.
That's what those things look like. Oh, yes, we are designing systems. And what is a system? Things connected to each other. That is the O and the R of the ORCA process. That is objects and relationships. That C is just, okay, now what do people want to do to those things? What are the calls to action and attributes? Let's just structure those objects. Let's get nitty gritty on the structure of those. Love that. Okay, cool. So we what have been, let's talk success. Upma, what have been like some of the successful moments that you've had with OOUX where you're like, yeah, it's working?
So I feel like I peaked early. So right when I was taking the certification course, I was starting a new project. It was actually a healthcare project. My team and I were asked to reimagine a healthcare portal. We didn't actually get to do the big work quite as straightforwardly as that, but it actually worked to my benefit, because as I'm learning from class, I'm going back the next day and I'm like, how do I apply this to this project? And the best part was I had a couple of people on my team, and like as soon as I was kind of ready to do this, I said, look, let's have a meeting. I want to take you through how I'm thinking about this. Like, come on this journey with me. If you hate this, we never talk about it again. But if you like it, like, let's keep talking. And so I showed them kind of like how I was thinking about the discovery and how I was thinking about what the object looked like. And when I got to show like the object and the attributes, there were two people. There was a visual designer and a content strategist. And before I could even say, what you should do now, what I would like for you to do now is like just wireframe using these Post-it notes. Before I could even say it, he just started wireframing using a Post-it notes. And I was like, yes, this is awesome. And the other person, the content strategist who was on my team, was actually Jillian Rochevelle, who came to do the certification like almost straight away after that meeting. So I feel like that was my biggest win. Since then it's been
like seeing people actually use the object map.
Yeah.
Like it's like the object map again, it's a means to an end so seeing people like actually doing the content strategy from an object map or building wireframes from an object map and getting shit done.
It was that was the best. I need to recreate that somehow. Yeah. But yeah. So, and then since then it's really just been like, how much can I sneak in and how much can I just like, how can I start working in this way and bring people along? And like people on my teams are definitely interested in how I'm thinking about things, and they want to know more, but it's often just like, I don't have time to do that. I'm doing things my way. And like, so that's been kind of the struggle.
Right. But you have said that like people will say things like, oh my gosh, this would have taken so much longer without you here, or like
It's
things.
not even so much longer. It's just like those insights never would have been realized.
Yeah, just wouldn't have come up in the project.
Yeah.
What about you, Imogen? What are some successes that have happened?
So I think the first one is probably managing to do the cohort with the Europe EST time difference.
Woo! And that's when it was live. That's when all those calls were live, like 11 o'clock at night for you.
It was like 10, 11. Rick and I was in like a constant WhatsApp, like, are you still awake? Just like helping each other out. But yeah, that was tough. I think the live calls at like 11 p.m. consistently was quite hard, but we did it. So yeah, that was first success. Although that wasn't the first OOUX thing. So I think I did a summer school over a couple of days.
Yeah.
That was the first introduction. And then it just it was like a light bulb, massive light bulb went off. And I was like, I can see the power, and signed up for the cohort pretty swiftly. But I was similar to Upma. I was transitioning jobs. I was starting a new project, which you alluded to earlier in terms of this was a web design project, but really it was, it was a repository for PDFs. It wasn't really a website. It was thousands, like 5,000 plus PDFs. And the website existed just to house PDFs essentially. So, but that was just one of many websites that housed many PDFs. So we had this kind of huge, mess of of a model where we had many websites, many systems, none of which talk to each other, a huge amount of duplication, a huge amount of inaccessible content. Note, I was working for an eye hospital.
Oh my gosh, the irony.
Nobody could access any of the content, or it was very, very difficult to find anything. So that was the sort of like the context. OOUX was the perfect basis to do this. And I used the live project in the cohort as I was doing the cohort, which I don't know if everyone does that, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend. But
we're not doing it. Cohort 8 anymore. No more custom projects unless you are recertifying. Then you can. I think
what was quite helpful with that. So I had someone in my team who just returned from maternity leave, and every time I went to a lecture and I sort of progressed through the cohort, I played it back and ran it with my colleague, just so that we could go through it together. And then kind of the outcome of that was that she then signed up to do the course herself, which was really helpful. So I guess similar is that seeing other people, kind of the fruits of, what you're saying makes sense, and for the light bulbs to kind of go off with other people. So it's kind of spreading that knowledge, spreading that seed is something that, getting an email, of from a workshop that says, that really made me think about things differently, or that really makes a lot of sense. I can see the value. All of that is a really, really great success in my view. I think meeting some of the people on this call, there's quite a few cohort 3 people here, making those connections with yourselves. Sophia, Upma, learning about you and the work that you do, and the sort of wider OOUX community is a real success in my view. So yeah, spreading the word. And
it's a special group of people, isn't it? We're a bunch of nerds. So oh my gosh, what was I just gonna say? I think just to piggyback on that, that success of hearing people, what I love it when people say, I understand this better than I ever have. Like, especially people that have worked at a company for 20 years. And like, I had that with Autodesk, where people were like, they had been selling the software for 20 years and then going through a week-long Orca sprint. They're like, I understand this world 10 times better than I did before. So seeing transformations with other people just in their own understanding and getting that shared understanding is like, oh, God, my heart feels so good. Okay, well, we are going to wrap up here in a minute. Please, I got one more. I got actually like 10 more questions, but we don't have time for that. I have one more question I really want to get to, but please put in the chat if you have any questions, anything you want to make sure that we ask these lovely ladies. I'm also putting a discount code in the chat for all of y'all that have actually showed up here. It's $100 off the self-paced masterclass. And that is only until tomorrow night. And then if you are interested in cohort 8, and you're not enrolled in the self-paced masterclass, I would highly recommend you enroll in the self-paced masterclass so that you know first that cohort 8 is opening up. That starts May 1st, but I'm pretty sure it's going to fill up real quick. Okay, I don't see any other questions, but feel free to put them in there. Oh, Karen liked her custom project. Karen, your custom project was very good. My question is what you see as the future of OOUX in general and also at your organization. Like, how do you see it maturing? Where do you want to see it go? What is your hope for OOUX in the broad scheme of things, but also within your organization? And we can start with you, Upma.
Yeah, my organization is where I feel like the most uphill battle. So the way that we're structured is we have a UX team, and then we have something called UX experience consultants, and I'm not sure how we're different. And then we have a content strategy team, and the content strategists, all of the people that I've sent to the certification have all come from the content strategy team. And meanwhile, my own UXers are interested, but not interested enough to take that next step. So I'm hoping that as I work on projects with some of my UX teammates, I can kind of pull them in. I usually am the only UXer on my project, so I don't usually get to do that. I'm on a year-long project right now where so it'll be a while. But yeah, that I think it's just kind of like, I thought after the certification, I'd go back and I'd be like, hey, look, everybody, there's this thing that you can use and it'll be so helpful. And I did actually do that. I had, it was attended by like 30 or so people in the on the UX team, coast to coast. And that didn't work. So yeah, so I think it's just going to be kind of a slow burn, just as I work with other people on my team and can kind of like show them the way. I have had success with a couple people. They haven't come to take the master class. Actually, I think one of them might be signed up for the self-paced class right now. I should go check. But so like it's a slow burn. It's going to be a slow burn for the org. But I think the people that I work with are immediately smitten. They see the value right away. And they're interested. So
I think it does have to be, I mean, transformation takes a long time, and just knowing like that especially if you're like, kind of has to be top down and bottom up at the same time, and figuring out different ways to work. I mean, we're still battling like the things that we talked about at the top of the hour, and like people being like, but wait, what is the difference between UX and UI? And like that kind of thing. That's just, we're still fighting those kind of fundamental battles. And this feels like even a more nuanced battle. So it's like, you just got to be in it and be patient. Imogen, what do you see as the glorious best case scenario future?
So my dream, I guess, is again focused on the public sector in the UK, but it's really to see user-centered design practices and object-oriented UX adopted across the whole of the public sector. So, you know, me in the NHS leading the charge, Rick in government leading the charge. And my plan was always to kind of work in the centre. So Rick and I are both part of the centres, the centre of government or the centre of the NHS. That's where policies are defined. That's where you know, where everything is kind of structured from, organised. You know, this is where the rules are set, essentially. This is where the digital stuff is done. But outside of the centre, on the front line, like in hospitals, which is where I started, this stuff is just not done, and it's not understood, and it's not known. You know, the opportunity at Moorfields was amazing, but I needed to come into the centre, build up that experience and that influence so that I can go back out and kind of influence that wider system, which is where I really think transformation lives, and the power of transformation is out there on the front line. But I just really want to be able to support the system in doing that, and so I can start in the center, and then hopefully that influence can kind of spread and kind of scale. So that's my that's a pretty big dream there. But
you just want to OOUX the country. That's all.
Yeah, basically.
I mean, I want to OOUX our country. I mean, just doing the work that I did for the National Park Service and just seeing like, oh my gosh, there's so much. I mean, like the research that he did, and it hooks into education and grants and the Environmental Protection Agency. Like all these systems start to overlap, and you're like, just start pulling the thread. And it's like, this is not just the National Park Service. This is higher ed. This is K through 12 education as well is involved here. Like field trips is an object. Oh, how to kid. Anyway, yes, it can turn into like, it's the fractal, right? You start looking at it and then you realize like, oh, I can dive in even deeper and see how this connects to this, which connects to this. And then you just want to OUX everything. You just want to put it all on an object map. Okay, we got one last little question from Karen. So if you have a meeting at the hour, you are now officially late to it. We are going to keep going. But if you do need to drop, that's totally cool. Just want to make sure everybody's watching the clock. Okay, so cool question from Karen. Any techniques, and hi, Karen, Karen's going to be our speaker next month, which is very exciting, talking about taxonomies. So make sure to sign up for that. Okay, any techniques you would not recommend to try for getting people on board with OOUX? Like what should we avoid in the beginning?
I have definitely had experience. So defining stuff is always the thing that I struggle with in workshops. And sometimes it's about really reading the room and working out whether you follow it like 1, 2, 3, 4, objects, relationships, call to actions, or attributes, or whether you actually pick and choose where you start. Because sometimes it's easier to start with relationships. Sometimes it's better to start with actions. You know, if you're in a verb focused landscape, sometimes it's easier to start there. So I think my advice would be to not necessarily use it as a kind of order of things. Like you don't have to follow it as the sort of 16-step process that's on the slide. Use it within your context. Like figure out who you're doing your session with. If they're going to struggle with definition, maybe park that for the time being and skip forward. If they're going to struggle with kind of the concept of cardinality, then I don't know, think of something else. Like it's kind of working out what's going to be best to get the best out of the people in your sessions. And that's generally sort of picking and choosing the things that you think are going to get some traction or get people excited. Or generally I find that noun foraging is always a good place to start. And I've never come across anyone who hasn't found that something to kind of hook onto. But then I tend to sort of jump around a bit. So I might then jump to attributes, or I might jump to kind of call to actions. I might just mix it up and play around with it. And I think that's my advice, is really, pick and choose and
be nimble with it. Like I'm surprised you said, not surprised. I'm validated you said definitions, because this is something like running these Orca sprints where we kind of spend all day on Monday on objects. And it is and I just frame it. I'm like, this is going to be a slow, it's almost like you don't get that much momentum. Like you got the noun foraging, but then you're like, oh, like you're trying to like, everybody's writing definitions. Like, so basically like in a workshop scenario, what you might do is you might have everybody write down their own definition of a thing. And then you kind of show your cards and everybody like goes around and says what their definition is. And then you're trying to like merge them together. And like, don't get caught up in wordsmithing at that point. Like, it's okay if your definition is messy. And also you can skip to instances, like coming up with a couple example instances. And like, it's like the most important thing is to make sure we all have a good idea on what this thing actually is before you kind of move into the other stuff. But it goes back and forth. Like, I'm working on something right now, and I'm in our Notion template, and I'm literally jumping around. I'm like doing a little bit of definition here, and then I do a little bit of the nested object matrix, and I'm like, oh, that thing needs to be 2 things. I need to go back to my definitions. Like, relationships help define the thing. So sometimes like the nested object matrix, I would say, is like, we get really good momentum there. Like that's where like such juicy conversations happen, where like I've had people just be like, let's just spend the entire week on the nested object matrix. Like we don't even like, don't worry about the calls to action. We'll spend an hour on that. Upma, any thoughts on like what doesn't work to get people started?
Yeah, I mean, I generally agree with everything Imogen said. I think going in guns blazing does not work. I think a subtler approach and listening to, well, for me being a consultant, so listening to what the client's problems are and then sort of picking the low hanging fruit. I've started with CTAs before because that was more because my own design team was all about doing journeys and flows, and that's what they had when I came into the project. And I was just like, I can't flip it where we are in the part, like where we are in the process of this project at the moment. So let me see if I can start with CTAs and see if we can like figure it out. It worked okay. But I was a researcher on that project. So what I really did was just like shaped my research to answer a bunch of questions I had. And then,
and if that's what you're, I mean, if like, I often say like in some of these beginning workshops that you're doing, again, it's like framing it. It's like, when we're coming up with more questions and answers, like that's a good thing. That's actually a good thing. It's awesome. Like look at this laundry list of things we have to bring back to research.
Yeah.
It's not like people be like, oh my God, like we're uncovering all this like dirt and mess. It's like when you clean up a room, you got to make a mess before like it gets worse before it gets better kind of thing. So I think
that at the start of a workshop, like the more questions you generate, that is a good thing. Like it might not feel like a good thing because you might not have all the answers, but trust me, that is a good thing. And that's what this process needs to do as well, is unearth all of those things that we don't have the answers to.
Right. I think framing is like, I would say, Karen, one thing I would not recommend is going straight in, guns blazing. You're super excited about the thing. OUX, 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 like it's my new religion. Like, no. Like framing is so important, that this is a thing that we're adding to the process. We're not taking anything away. Like it shouldn't feel like stepping on people's toes. Like, oh, we're going to take this away. We're going to take this away. No, this is in support of the stuff that we're already doing. And it's a tool for understanding. It's a tool for uncovering misalignment and uncovering questions for research. And if you can frame it like that, as this is a tool for us to get on the same page, then I think that people will be a little bit more receptive to like, this is the thing that's going to give us all the answers. It will give you all the answers eventually, but it will generate questions first. Cool. Awesome. Wonderful conversation. We are 10 minutes over, so I'm going to let y'all go. Thank you so much for being here. Imogen, Upma, can y'all put your LinkedIn in the chat real quick? And just so people can connect with you, connect with me. I'm easy to find. I don't have the link right now. I'm asking y'all to do stuff without having it. But anyway, Imogen Levy, Upma Singh, Sophia Prater, connect with us on LinkedIn or wherever. I don't know. LinkedIn is like my social media of choice these days. And then that discount code, scroll to the chat and find that. And happy OUXing, y'all. Have a great rest of your day.